Women will be happy, healthy, confident, and free. You will no longer be thinking about abortion. You will be protected, and I will be your protector.
He's not their protector, by any means. They're like everyone else to him. They can be used for his benefit, for his pleasure, as a power play. It's just outrageous that he is still out there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to George Conway Explains It All to Sarah. I'm Sarah Longwell, publisher of The Bulwark, and because I'm not a lawyer, I've asked George Conway from the Society for the Rule of Law to explain the legal news to me, like he does every week. George, how you doing, buddy?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. You got some news today. You're breaking some news. You're doing some things.
Yeah, doing some stuff. We launched a couple of ads. There are, we've done a lot of mocking ads for Trump, and these ads take a different tone because they're about a different subject, but they relate as ever, and more than anything else, I think, to Trump's psychology and his aberrant behavior. I mean, we had two of his sexual assault victims, Natasha Stoynoff and Jessica Leeds, and they do on camera. Basically, they tell their stories in 1 minute. We have to cut it down to a minute for TV. And I think they're very compelling, and I hope voters find it compelling. And I tweeted them out this morning. The PAC tweeted them out, and we're going to run them, as always, in Mar-a-Lago and Bedminster, but we're also going to run them nationally on CNN and MSNBC and News Nation. And we're going to do some, we're going to run them in Pennsylvania also. So we've got a big rollout for that, and it's our biggest ad buy yet. And we hope to have more coming on this. But I mean, the real point is, not just that he's a bad guy and a schmuck and he abuses women. It's sort of the more we're trying to show how the personal impact of what he does. Particularly it's timely now, given his claims in the last week. I guess he must have talked to some pollsters or somebody about needing to really shore up the female voter side of things in this election. And, he's been saying some absolutely ridiculous stuff, like you'll never have to worry about abortion anymore under me. He's like, what's he talking about? That he's the protector of women, and women have had it very bad, but I will make it all better. I will fix it all, which is, deeply ironic given his misogyny and his history of sexual abuse of women. And it just was a coincidence that we've had these ads in process for a number of weeks. It just happened to be that he, opened himself up right to it at the moment that we were about to release them. And I'm hopeful that they'll have some impact. Some of the people who helped produce them ran some testing on the ads, and they found them to be very effective. I don't fully understand the testing. You probably do, Sarah, because it's the stuff that you do. They were very effective even among Trump voters. And I think the point too, from the psychopath standpoint, if you go through the diagnostic criteria for the two of the personality disorders that he clearly has, narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. I mean, the story of him and his abuse of women and the E.G. and Carroll case and his defamation of E.G. Carroll, they just check so many of the boxes for those personality disorders: the lack of empathy, the manipulativeness, the deceit, the complete lack of remorse, and the inability to treat others as human and to obey basic decency and rules and laws, and to the impulsiveness. There's so many boxes that this checks that this story alone, the story of all of these women. I mean, their contention is that there are 24 of them. They're all lying. I mean, that's ridiculous. When it comes to Donald Trump, we know who's lying. But also, it really illustrates his unfitness for office, I think. And just because he's somebody who only thinks of himself, cannot think of others as equal or human beings or having rights that to invoke against him. And no, it just generally shows why he's a disgrace and someone who really should have no role in American public life.
Okay, well, let's watch one of the ads. This is Natasha, and we're going to have Barry play the clip so everybody can see it.
My name is Natasha Stoynoff. In 2005, I went to interview Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. At one point, Melania went upstairs to change her clothes for the next photo shoot. And Trump said to me, I want to show you this beautiful painting, this beautiful room. He leads me to this room, pushes me against the wall, and starts kissing me forcefully. I tried to push him. He kept coming back at me. I was in shock and smothered, and he had his hands here against my shoulders. I felt sick inside. I felt horrified. And thank goodness the butler charges into the room. Like many women, I blamed myself. So Trump turned to me and said, you know we're going to have an affair, don't you? And Melania was approaching. I was horrified. When the Access Hollywood tape came out, and also stories of many other women, including E. Jean Carroll, I realized I was not to blame, that he was just a predator of women. What could have happened if the butler had not come into the room? Donald Trump is an adjudicated sexual assaulter. We cannot elect this man as president.
Anti-Psychopath PAC Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
George, just quickly, how did it come to be? Like, how did you meet these people? Why'd you decide to do this?
The story, look, I mean, I have a history when it comes to abusive politicians and sexually abusive politicians. I was one of the elves in the Paula Jones matter. I ghost wrote briefs for Paula Jones that won her immunity decision against in the Supreme Court against Bill Clinton. And I did a lot of other things in connection with that, including ghostwriting the briefs that got her the discovery of the other women in that case. And what moved me at that time was the arrogance of Bill Clinton. I mean, people say, oh, well, you were just a right-wing hack. And maybe, I mean, to them, I guess I was. But what really bothered me when the allegations against Paula Jones came out was just, this is just outrageous. This is not how public officials should behave. It's appalling that the man sent a state trooper down from his hotel room at the Excelsior Hotel in Little Rock, Arkansas, to fetch a woman he found attractive who was working a conference desk, a state employee for a state business promotion conference, has a state trooper bring her up to his hotel room and then drops his pants. And, you know, I was appalled at that, but also appalled when Bill Clinton's White House began floating, and they ultimately did assert this, that the notion that somehow he should be immune from litigation over that during the term of his presidency. And that got me involved in the case. Fast forward these years later, I began to feel guilty about the fact that I had supported Donald Trump, and basically he was worse. And he makes Bill Clinton look like a piker. And there came a time in the summer of 2019 when E. Jean Carroll came forth with her allegations, which have now been proven in court conclusively against Donald Trump. And I thought to myself, this is outrageous, because I have to say something. And in fact, what the Trump campaign had done in 2016, Steve Bannon famously did this. He brought out the women who had accused Bill Clinton of sexual abuse. Kathleen Willey, Juanita Broaddrick, who claimed that she had been raped, and Paula Jones. And Trump made a big deal of it. And I was thinking, as I was reading and hearing about E. Jean's story when it came out in New York Magazine, it's like, well, her story actually is stronger than Juanita Broaddrick's. If you believed Juanita Broaddrick, Republicans, well, you're enormously hypocritical if you don't give credence to E. Jean Carroll's story, because there were more confirmatory details, which include the fact that E. Jean Carroll told two of her friends in confidence about what had happened immediately after it had happened. And these are credible, real people. Sheila Birnbaum, the author of the Preppy Handbook, a famous figure, and then a newscaster named, whose name escapes me right now, but she was on Channel 5 in New York for many years. And, to me, after having seen all of the Me Too stories written by Ronan Farrow and others, and Jodi Kantor and all these other great reporters, I realized, one of the things that really makes a difference in having confidence in these cases, which are he said, she said cases, is the contemporaneous corroboration, which, by the way, Paula Jones had, because she immediately came down from the hotel room in Little Rock in 1991 and was just horrified and told the other woman working at the desk about it. But anyway, to go back to this situation, I just felt, and also corroborative is the pattern. That's the other thing that you see in these Me Too cases, is that, when these guys don't just do it once. It's not that they see a woman and she's attractive and all of a sudden, something plays in their head and they just do this once. They do it all the time. They do it they do it whenever they can. And that to me was like, okay, this case, this what E. Jean Carroll's saying is, it's almost certainly true, I thought. And so I wrote an op-ed piece, and now we know it's true because we've seen all the evidence. We've seen people testify in court, including these two women that we highlight today, Natasha Stoynoff and Jessica Leeds. They testified about their experiences to corroborate what happened to E. Jean Carroll. And so I wrote an op-ed piece in the summer of 2019 in the Washington Post that basically said, Republicans, if you believed Juanita Roderick, then you should give credence to E. Jean Carroll as well. And I just went after the hypocrisy. And, it didn't get much traction on the right, as you might suppose. In any event, that prompted, by coincidence, not long thereafter, actually, that prompted Natasha Stoynoff, the woman we just saw, to email me and to thank me for being supportive of, Trump's assault victims. And we became friendly. And also by coincidence, within a week or two thereafter, I don't remember the precise sequence, I went to a cocktail party in Manhattan where I happened to meet E. Jean Carroll. And I not only hooked E. Jean Carroll up with Roberta Kaplan, who we have had on this podcast, who won those two verdicts on E. Jean's behalf, $88.3 million against Trump, that he has now had to fork the money over to the court and submit in court. It's all there. The money's all there for E. Jean. I also connected E. Jean Carroll with Natasha, and Natasha was connected to a bunch of other women who had gone through 2016 and had come out and spoken out. And there was, they were obviously frustrated and disappointed that people weren't really taking their stories with the seriousness that they should have. And I kind of became their patron saint, I guess, a little bit. And so I know a bunch of these women, and it's, it's a courageous thing for them to come forward once again. I mean, they went through a lot. I mean, one woman who was considering going on and doing one of these ads, had a daughter, had a daughter who was in high school, and she suffered PTSD from 2016, so she couldn't do an here. Because she went to a MAGA school and people were attacking her and her mother and saying the most disgraceful things. And, it's very, I can't understate how courageous it is. And I can't express how much gratitude I have that Natasha and Jessica have put their stories out there once again. And I think the way we have done it is to let them tell their own stories. It's their story. It's what happened to them. And I think what happens in the media din is there's all this back and forth and recharacterizations and of who these women are, but it's rare that you actually get to see these victims. And that's the point of the ad. And that's why, I thought in 2020, I kind of wanted to get a documentary filmmaker to do one large program where you get all of the women telling their stories, because many of them have just incredible parallels of exactly how of his modus operandi. And he just he couldn't get the filmmaker couldn't get funding for it because people were too afraid to go there. And I still don't understand why many people are afraid to go there. And they're afraid to go there because it's so unpleasant. But we can't avert our eyes to this. This is Donald Trump. This is who he is. It is part and parcel of his persona, his personality, his inhumanity. And I thought it was just really important to bring that to the fore one more time, one last time, I hope, and so that we'll never really hear from him again, I hope.
Yeah, one can hope. All right, let's listen to Jessica Leeds' story, and then we're going to move on to talk about the filibuster. We're going to do a big, hard pivot. So go ahead, Bear.
1979, I had gotten on an airplane. The stewardess said to me, "Would you like to come up to first class?" In the window seat was a gentleman, said that his name was Donald Trump. The airplane took off, and all of a sudden, Donald Trump started groping me. He was trying to kiss me, and I'm trying to push him away. He was basically overpowering me. When he started putting his hand up my skirt, I got out of the seat, grabbed my purse, and went back to my original seat. And I certainly was shook up by the whole thing. 2 years later, at this fundraiser, up comes Trump and his wife. And he looked at me and he said, "I remember you. You're that cunt from the airplane." Donald Trump views women as for his entertainment. He is a serial predator. He has said it at point blank, and he's done it, and he will continue to do it.
Anti-Psychopath PAC Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
George, I guess maybe a last question on this.
Yeah.
Were they glad to be able to do this, to make ads saying this? Like, does this feel like a closure for them, or?
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, you'd have to ask them. I think that they felt that they owed it to the country and to other women and to sexual abuse victims generally to do this. And I'm so proud. I mean, I'm just really proud of them. And I just think they just did an amazing job. And I hope it does have some impact.
It's interesting. It's timely in that Donald Trump has suddenly decided, apparently, he realized both that women can vote and that he's doing poorly with them, almost historically poorly. And so it's interesting. When he did that riff in his speech the other night where he said, "I'm your protector."
You will be protected, and I will be your protector. Women will be happy, healthy, confident, and free. You will no longer be thinking about abortion.
It did have that feeling of the way that an abuser or predator sort of gaslights people.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to know how Donald Trump really thinks about women, go back to that video we just saw and note his use of the C word. Right? I mean, we played it live here. I'm not going to say it again, and we're bleeping it though on television, but we have it online. It's the same word he used directed at Robbie Kaplan. Remember
I do remember
episodes where he basically called her a C, UNT, like to her face, using those, spelling it out. See you next Tuesday, he said to her. That's what he thinks of women. That's his. He's not their protector by any means. They're like everyone else to him. They can be used for his benefit, for his pleasure, as a power play. They're just different. They can do that. He's sexually attracted to them. But it's not even sex. It's about just power and abuse. And it's just outrageous that he is still out there and can say these things. I don't know how else to put it.
Well, I hope that it reignites a bit of a conversation, although it's a conversation that's already happened. I mean, J.D. Vance has also just something that's more and more in the focus groups that is coming up where people bring up the childless cat ladies. I mean, sort of nothing has broken through the way that has. And by J.D. Vance, I think sort of reanimating it like so much of this Trump's behavior is sort of baked in, right? Through multiple election cycles, we've litigated these things. Right. And so people kind of shrug at them. But J.D. Vance's particular weirdness about women, has kind of like re-raised the salience. And so, as well as the fact that Trump's numbers are absolutely dismal with women. I was on Nicole Wallace yesterday talking about this. Yeah. And so I do think it is a good moment to remind people that this is who he is.
And politics is funny and political advertising is funny in the sense that, I shouldn't be telling you this because you're the expert. I'm just a lawyer, right? But.
Well, tell the audience.
Well, tell the audience. Okay. And you can disagree or agree. Mm-hmm. The things that I think are most effective in advertising, political advertising in particular, is when you tell people things that they know deep down are true. And that's one aspect of this that I think is important. The other aspect is repetition. And repetition, it's hard to break through, particularly today in this media environment where you have the mainstream media is kind of itself kind of lost in the din with social media, things like the Bulwark, right? And repetition matters. And then you never know when you push that, when you repeat something and it combines with other things that people have learned, and then all of a sudden it gels. And, that's why I want to go back to this. I think people have seen enough, they know enough now, and to see what these women have suffered through and to think that they are just two of dozens, I think, I hope and pray it has that last impact, this one last time, this one last going over this soil will mean that we don't have to do it again. Ever.
Yeah, I completely agree with the theory, sort of the advertising. And, there's this phrase the kids use now, like it hits different. Like there's, right, when people say like it hits different. I do think that's something unique to this election cycle that was not present in 2020 or 2016 is that Donald Trump's because he was a celebrity. It was basically, he basically never said anything truer than when you're a celebrity, they let you do it, because that can be a metaphor for the entire, both the electorate, the media, like a way in which Trump has been able to play by sort of different rules and have different expectations put on him. But here's one of the things that I think is different this time. There was not, in those last two election cycles, a policy issue that mattered so much to women that was at stake. Right. And so I think now it's one thing to dismiss it as locker room talk back then. It's another thing for women to look at Donald Trump and be like, I cannot trust you on this issue that matters to me. It is now high salience in this election. Okay.
Post
all right.
Bubs and post cat lady and post a whole hell of a lot of other things. It's amazing how we got here.
George, let's go. Let's pay some bills, and we'll center ourselves by talking about some pants that I know you like. Because let's be real, guys, wearing pants sucks. Who decided that stiff, uncomfortable fabric was necessary to go out and look put together? Well, I'm here to tell you those days are finally over. Public Rec has developed the revolutionary Daymaker pant for men that feel as comfortable as sweats, but look and fit like tailored pants. They're super stretchy and made with an elastic waistband, but you can wear them absolutely anywhere. Wear them lounging around the house on football Sundays, or you can even wear them on that first date and no one will know you're wearing sweats. You can finally have indoor comfort with outdoor style by wearing Public Rec's Daymaker pants. For a limited time only, our listeners get 20% off their entire order when you use code AskGeorge at publicrec.com. That's 20% off your order at publicrec.com with promo code AskGeorge. So, George, tell me, how excited are you to get your hands on some of these Public Rec pants?
I can't wait. I'm going to go right online after we record here and enter the discount code.
Yeah, you can enter your own discount code. They'll probably send you some. I got to say, this is me, I have been agitating. All the clothing companies that are advertising on our site are for dudes. I like stretchy pants. I like pants that have indoor comfort and outdoor style. So, let's get some women's pants going here, guys.
So we are advertising for ads now?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm advertising for.
Well, yeah. I don't know what the demographic breakdown of this podcast, but I'm sure.
Well, I guess I'm asking Public Rec. I'm asking Public Rec to consider moving into the female, to making clothes for women, because we too want to stop suffering in regular pants. For a limited time, our listeners get 20% off when you use code AskGeorge at checkout. That's 20% off with the code AskGeorge at publicrec.com. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Say goodbye to pants that put up a fight, because when comfort meets style, you found Public Rec. Okay, George, it's time for the filibuster.
The filibuster.
I gotta tell you, there are not that many issues about which I don't have strong and somewhat firmly held opinions. The filibuster is one that I struggle with a smidge, because I like institutions, and I like institutions to not change things without giving it real thought, as we know from our discussions about the court. That being said, having the 60 vote threshold has basically led to absolute gridlock. And so the reason this is coming up is because Kamala Harris had said she would get rid of the filibuster, which is something Democrats have been talking about for a while, which I would say I sort of casually oppose. I don't love the idea of just eliminating the filibuster, because they eliminated the filibuster when it came to judicial appointments, and I think that has gone poorly. I do not think it has, I don't think it's worked out well not having that. But, so she put this out, Republicans, in fact, Joe Manchin refused to endorse her, said he would not be endorsing her because Kamala Harris said she would get rid of the filibuster. Now, she did say she was going to do a carve out, I think, for Roe v. Wade was her position on this. But once you take it and carve it out for one thing, it seems like you probably end up with it for everywhere else. So where do you come down on this?
Well, I come down a little bit esoterically on this. I mean, the reason why people are so torn about this, I think, is because it cuts both ways. Democrats can use the filibuster to stop things at times, and Republicans can use filibusters to stop things at times. Democrats used to use the filibuster to stop judicial nominations. Remember, particularly during the George W. Bush administration, a number of really good nominees, including a close friend of mine, were blocked by the filibuster. And then, but other times, some bad legislation that other people, but it cuts both ways. It's a tool that can be used both ways. And the reason why people like Manchin want to defend the filibuster is because those people who are toward the center, although Manchin, I can't figure out what Manchin is, gets so much more power as a result of the filibuster, because their votes matter more on whether or not the thing even gets to a piece of legislation or a nomination even gets to the floor. But it can be abused. I mean, take, for example, essentially, I don't know whether I'm not a Senate rules maven, so I'm not sure whether those military officer nominations whether that technically was a filibuster problem, but it gets abused. And the reason why it gets abused is because you can do it, and a senator can basically put a hold on anything at any time using the filibuster. And he or she doesn't have to go to the floor and read from the telephone book or anything like that, or do the Mr. Smith goes to Washington thing. It's costless. And the reason why the Senate did that, again, I'm not a Senate rules man, but they did that in the early 70s, is so that, when they had filibusters, they could keep passing legislation. You could just have a filibuster without anybody going on the floor. And I think the problem is it's abused too much, and it does create gridlock. Again, it cuts both ways is the important thing to remember. I mean, Kristen Sinema pointed out yesterday that if Kamala Harris were successful in persuading the Senate, and it's really the Senate's internal prerogative, to abandon the filibuster to restore Roe, well, that could mean that some subsequent Republican Senate could do the opposite and ban abortion nationwide. I mean, it depends on who's winning and who's ahead in it. So my solution has been for a number of years, I don't like the gridlock. At the same time, I appreciate the concept behind the filibuster, which is it's the principle that the Senate has always adhered to of having unlimited debate, generally on most things. You can talk yourself to death about things. And the way that used to be done, the filibuster used to be that you'd have to keep everybody up all night. You have to hold the floor. You have to talk, maybe reading from the phone book or whatnot. But it's just like Mr. Smith goes to Washington. And that has a couple of effects. One is people are only going to do it when they mean it. And it exacts a cost. And you can only do it for a finite amount of time. And so you can get, if a senator wants to use the floor to demonstrate to the country how terrible something is and is willing to commit to showing that by, staying up on his or her feet all night, every night, along with maybe a couple of colleagues, I don't know how exactly it works, then, okay, let them do that. Let them do that. But
can you go to the bathroom?
I don't know. Is that in the Senate rules? I don't know. I mean,
I've always wondered if, like, when you hold the floor, can you take bathroom breaks?
They've always, in the old days, they used to have these spittoons, I guess. I don't even want to go there. But so I don't know. But I think it seems to me that the old style filibuster made a lot more sense. I mean, I'm not an expert on it. I wonder, that's the kind of filibuster they had in the 1960s, and the Southern senators filibustered civil rights legislation. But at the end of the day, the legislation passed.
Yeah.
So I think, if they had the current system back then, who knows whether any of that would have passed. But I don't profess to be an expert in Senate procedure or the history of the Senate. But that's my feeling is that's the solution is make these people stand up and talk.
Yeah.
I feel bad for the producers at C-SPAN, but hey.
I'm always trying to deal make and everybody be a little unhappy, but get a little closer to where we want to be. That just temperamentally ends up being what I do. And so I've always thought instead of the 60 vote threshold, what if you dropped it to 55? So that it wasn't such a hurdle, but you still had to get more than just, a 51 vote majority.
That's not crazy. That would be an interesting experiment. But the other thing about it is, you talk about not wanting to muck things up, and the Constitution doesn't say anything about supermajorities.
No, I know.
It basically, by default, it impliedly, it allows these houses of Congress to set their own rules, but implicitly, the number of people needed to pass legislation in either house is a majority because that's the way it always has been, and that's the way the framers, I think, intended it. So that to me is another reason that counsels toward going back to the older wisdom. Sometimes sometimes they were right in the past.
Yeah, I guess the case that I find moderately persuasive around maintaining the filibuster, and I think this is where Joe Manchin lives and dies on this, is that if you went to a straight majority, then you would you couldn't get anything to stick. You would have you would pass things through the Senate, and then after the next election, when the Senate changes hands in terms of leadership, you codify Roe, and then the Republicans come in and they repeal it again, and then you have Obamacare, and then you repeal Obamacare, and it just becomes this tit for tat back and forth in which the country doesn't get a lot of stability once a law passes.
But whether that happens depends on how people vote.
Yeah.
So, if you're willing to take the political hit from passing a piece of legislation, and it doesn't turn out that people like it, why shouldn't they take it and get rid of it?
I think that's true. I just say as a practical thing, the Senate has changed so much in terms of the incentives now all run toward the more extreme, right? People are not it used to be that you would have a lot of senators of a different party than who your state voted for president, right? So you could have Democratic senators, Republican, but they still vote for Republicans. That stuff's not happening anymore.
No.
Maine is basically the only state. And so, and I just think Democrats should think hard about it because there is, in terms of land mass, right? So like Republicans, they get 2 senators in Montana.
Yeah.
They get 2 senators from North Dakota.
Right.
And Alabama, these.
Right. And California gets 2 senators.
And California gets 2 senators. So it's just, should people not reflexively do this because I think it works to their benefit now.
On the other hand,
swing back fast.
On the other hand, you can point to it the other way, that it allows too much veto precisely because many states are overrepresented in the Senate and some states are underrepresented. The overrepresentative states their senators can block legislation that a vast majority of the American people want. Cuts the other way too. It really depends on the particular issue in the particular moment, I think.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Okay. It does make sense.
Yeah.
I was interested in your opinion on it because I think we're going to, if Kamala wins, I think we're going to be talking about it. B, I think it's going to become something of an issue potentially in this campaign, like the courts are. It's the kind of thing that I think for people in our lane, the sort of center-right folks, the conservatives who don't like Trump, it's the kind of thing that the ending the filibuster is one of those things. There's a reason.
Well, that's why I like my true conservative approach, which is actually reactionary in this. Technically reactionary because I'm saying let's go back to the 60s.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The originalist in you, right?
Yes. If the originalist, I don't know. I don't think the framers even imagined where we are today with the filibuster. I don't think.
That is true. Okay, George, our second sponsor today is Factor. Summer might be over, but that doesn't mean it's not still warm and sunny outside. So fuel up for these fall days with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. You can meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. You'll have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. And there are more than 60 add-ons to help you feel fueled up and feeling good all day. And you can choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage your calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. You can also discover a wide variety of easy options for the entire day, like breakfast, midday bites, and more. Treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Head to factormeals.com/AskGeorge50 and use code AskGeorge50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. George, you still eating a lot of Factor?
Absolutely. I still have a bunch of them in my refrigerator. Sometimes I stock up on too many of them, but yeah, I still eat them. And they're real simple. They're great. You can change the menu if you want and go one way or the other, more vegetables, more meat, more this or more that. And it's great. And it'll help you fit into your public sweats.
Clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, the elastic waistband is actually for your littler waist because you're eating your good Factor meals.
That's right. You lose and you can still wear the same stuff. That's the synergies in our ads are just amazing.
Well, once again, that's code AskGeorge50 at factormeals.com/AskGeorge50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Okay, now we're going to talk about the legal news a little bit. Now that we're 41 minutes into the show.
Legal, the law. What about the law?
I want to do a quick spin through a couple things that have come up. Because in the January 6th case, we're recording on Wednesday the 25th, and tomorrow on the 26th, Jack Smith will file his brief and lay out his entire case. I've heard from my lawyer producer, Heather, that I've heard the courts typically have page limits for briefs, that in DC it is 45 pages, so that's the limit. But Smith asked Judge Chutkan if he could file a 180-page brief. That's a lot of facts he must have there, which will include all the evidence that Smith intends to introduce at trial. And obviously Trump's legal team freaked out because they don't want any more January 6th facts coming out now. So, yesterday, what happened? What did Judge Chutkan rule?
Well, I mean, what happened is that look, the Supreme Court back in June said that presidents sort of have this partial kind of immunity, that they have this immunity that relates very specifically to things that they do as part of their official duties. And the question from there is, well, what is that? And the Supreme Court basically said that the conversations that Trump had when he corruptly tried to get the Justice Department to intervene on his behalf in stealing the election, that was off limits. But a lot of the other stuff, it's pretty clear, I think, or will be clear, that it's still something that can be subject to a criminal prosecution because it didn't involve his official acts. The only thing that's sort of, I think, ultimately could go either way, although I think it should go in the prosecution's favor, is Trump's beating up on Mike Pence. And the reason, even though Pence is the vice president and Trump is the president, this had nothing to do with executive power, executive duties, or official duties, because A, this was about reelecting Donald Trump, and B, Pence was acting in his capacity in connection with the electoral vote count on January 6, 2021, in his capacity as president of the Senate. It wasn't an executive job. And so we're going to see a lot of evidence in particular on that. But the way this works is the Supreme Court basically instructed the district court, Judge Chutkan, to go through the evidence with a fine-tooth comb to figure out, what stuff can go in as evidence and what stuff can be chargeable and what stuff cannot be. And the only way to do that is to lay it all out. And some of us have been talking for quite some time that she could have ended up having a mini trial. She may yet still do that. But the only way to go through all this stuff is to basically lay it out in front of the judge and have the judge sort it out. And what Trump did here, his lawyers did here, is they don't want this, as you say, they don't want this stuff coming out before the election. And so they started whining like, oh, we should go first. Oh, how can you allow them to do 180 pages? Oh, it doesn't make any sense for Trump to go first to file the opening brief because he doesn't have all the stuff that the court has to go through. Okay, what you normally do is when somebody is offering to present evidence to the court, you present the evidence, you show it to the court, and then the other side can object. So it made sense to do it exactly the way Judge Chutkan has decided to do it. One of the other arguments they made, the Trump people made, was 180 pages. Ooh. It's like, well, those 45-page limits are just meant, as a guideline, as a standard. They are not meant, to be in every circumstance, because sometimes you need more than that. For example, if you have a trial before a judge and not a jury, the court has to make extensive findings of fact and conclusions of law because it is the trier of fact. It is deciding everything. And those things are usually monster documents, as are sometimes summary judgment documents, motions for summary judgment. I've written 250-page briefs, post-trial briefs in the past. And this is the equivalent of that because the prosecution has to lay this all out. Because if it doesn't lay this all out, the court could say, well, you waived your opportunity to present this. You didn't show this to me when you had the opportunity to. So what Judge Chutkan did here makes absolutely perfect sense. It's a very sensible approach to administering this highly unusual remand from the Supreme Court. And I also, like the fact that she basically said all the stuff that Trump's lawyers were making in their brief opposing this process about politics. I mean, she just said that's not my realm. And Trump also made some argument. Trump's lawyers also made some argument. Oh, you're doing the whole expedition thing. You're making this expedited the way Jack Smith wanted to do it when he wanted to skip the D.C. circuit and on the immunity appeal. No, he's not. It's friggin' October basically now. Okay, and the Supreme Court came back in June with this decision. Okay, time's a wasting. This isn't going to get decided before the election. And this case isn't going to get tried before the election. If Trump wins, it won't get tried at all. But they got to get moving on it. I mean, it's been sitting here long enough. And the other aspect of it is that for people who are expecting like, oh my gosh, we're going to get to see all the grand jury testimony. We're going to see every jot and tittle of what Jack Smith and the FBI have accumulated over the past couple of years. I'm not sure that's going to be true either, because there's going to be a lot of this that's going to be under seal. And this 180-page brief, which is going to be backed by piles and piles of exhibits, probably thousands of pages, is going to be, when we actually see this brief tomorrow night, it's going to have all sorts of black marks through it of things that are under seal. And I think what's going to happen is there's going to be some additional satellite litigation where media groups, the CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, NBC, all the major networks and newspapers are going to join in and hire like Ted Boutros or some other media lawyer and say, look, this is too much. The public has a right to see some of this stuff, more of this stuff. And we'll see how much of it gets out before the election.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting. We chose to do this pod before it came out because it's probably going to take some days to like wade through 100 and like really have good analysis. So we're not going to like jump on it right away. But we'll give you guys the breakdown when we've got it. Is there anything that you do? Because this is the $64,000 question or $1 million. I forget what that phrase is, but. Do you think there could be some explosive stuff?
Yeah, I do. The things that I am most interested in are the things that we knew we weren't getting to hear and see 2 summers ago when the January 6th committee, Liz Cheney's and Chairman Thompson's January 6th committee and Adam Kinzinger's committee, Jimmy Raskin, all the great people, heard evidence. They didn't fight on some stuff as hard as maybe they could have, because they wanted to get as much out there as quickly as possible. They wanted to finish. And I think there's a lot of stuff in there that would be, for example, what did Trump say and what to Cipollone, his White House counsel, and what did Cipollone say back? We only got a little piece of that. Okay, we only got a little piece of some of the conversations that went on in the White House on January 6th. And there's going to be more stuff that I think Jack Smith probably found that from leads that he got from the January 6th committee. And we haven't seen that either because it's been 2 full years. So there could be some very, very interesting stuff. And we actually have not heard Mike Pence's story about what happened. We've heard it from a couple of his aides, but we haven't heard it from Mike Pence himself. Like what happened and what deliberations did he engage in and how he felt and what he was thinking and what Trump said, directly said to him. We don't know that yet. And, that's going to be a point of contention in this briefing. I think the Trump people are going to argue, well, a president talking with his vice president about anything is off limits under the Supreme Court's decision. And then the Jack Smith is going to say this had nothing to do with his official duties, had nothing to do with the exercise of executive authority. Therefore, it is not subject to presidential immunity. And as a result, the court is going to have to focus very, very closely on the Pence aspect of the story. And that will be interesting whenever it comes out, because she's going to have to explain why she thinks that evidence is in or out of this case. And that's probably going to be the subject of an appeal as well. So we're going to learn some interesting things. I just don't think we're going to learn anything. We're not necessarily going to learn all that is interesting. And I think we're going to learn most of what's interesting are things we're not going to learn until after November 5th.
Doesn't Trump have to reply though by October 17th?
Yeah, he does. He I guarantee you he'll ask for more time because he'll say, oh my gosh, 180 pages and there are 2,000 pages of FBI 302s and grand jury testimony and this, that, and the other thing. But yeah, that's the current schedule and we'll see. But again, a lot of that's going to be under seal. He may get a delay, who knows? But at that point, though, he may be encouraged to respond with something before the election so that he can get some kind of public lick in to counter whatever gets released tomorrow, depending on how much of that stuff is interesting.
Okay, before we wrap, I just have one more thing to say, which is, hey guys, if you love this podcast and you want to listen to all Bulwark podcasts ad-free, join Bulwark Plus today. You'll also get our top-notch newsletters, the Triad, and Morning Shots. So click the link in the description and become a Bulwark Plus member now. Go do it. It'll help support us doing more shows like this. So come on, guys. And George, I want to say thanks once again for explaining the legal news to me and just talking filibuster and the new Psychopath ads. And all of you, don't forget to hit subscribe, leave us a review, email us at askgeorge@thebulwark.com, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, George Conway, he's a man with a plan. Got to sit down with Sarah Longwell, take a stand, explain all the legal problems they're piling high. With Donald Trump, oh my, oh my, oh my. He said, Sarah, let me break it down for you. There's obstruction of justice, corruption too, the legal tangles and troubles, they're growing fast. It's a storm that's gonna last and last. Oh, Conway, tell them well all about it. Those legal problems can't live without it. From the Ebola to the Russian ties. Oh, Sarah, listen close.